I've got Liberal Party Senator for New South Wales, Hollie Hughes, with me on the line for the last time in 2023. Great to have you on. Thank you for your time.
No problem, Smithy. Definitely looking forward to the end of the year.
Yeah, I'm a little bit that way as well. I sort of started, it was during, not last week, but the week before, I just started to cut a few corners, and you start to do that as you get tired towards the end of the year, don't you?
I am counting down until Friday. Absolutely.
Yeah. Now, I don't know whether this is related to the Festival of All Things Green, which was just held in Dubai, but there's now pressure building on the Labor government and from the unions and Albanese's left faction to kill the economy even more. They're now talking about a 70% carbon reduction by 2035. I can't wait to see or hear what that will bring us in terms of changing the weather patterns of Australia, Hollie.
It will do nothing to change the weather patterns of Australia because, as you and I have discussed, and I've said plenty of times previously elsewhere, that global warming, climate change, any of those phenomena, whatever you think of them, it's not the responsibility of one country to change. It's absolutely a global thing and requires any sort of global effort. So whatever changes we make in Australia is going to have very, very little impact whatsoever, considering we are less than 1.3% of all global emissions. So there seems to be an overinflated self-importance of what our contribution can be when it comes to these guys. But there is absolutely no way we are getting anywhere near that target whatsoever without nuclear energy in the mix. We know it's zero emissions and it can provide affordable, reliable baseload power. Yet this Labor government is insistent on pandering to some extreme green agenda, or green in the sense of our crazy unicorn farmer green political party here in Australia, and the extreme left who oppose nuclear and in all shapes and forms, regardless of its use in medicine and many other things. But, never let reality get in the good way of a Greens argument.
You're never going to be able to power Australia with a windmill. It doesn't matter how many windmills you build.
It's just never going to happen. It is absolutely never going to happen. And Casanova Bowen, the Minister for Pink Bats previously, the minister who was responsible for immigration that let NZYQ in, that led to all of this detention migration issues we're facing, this guy's been responsible for every single stuff up we've almost seen over the last decade or so in this country, 15 years since they were last in power. Yet here he is now in charge of the energy transmission and actually overseas trying to call for the end of fossil fuels, which is the two biggest parts of our economy and our exports. I mean, this guy is just a lunatic.
He's a numbskull.
He is absolutely insane. I don't know how, Chalmers or any of his other cabinet colleagues sit there and not literally strangle him when he goes out and says this stuff, because every time he talks, he's just shutting down the Australian economy for zero global benefit when it comes to emissions. It is beyond belief that this guy is allowed anywhere near the cabinet table, let remains in government. He just should go and let the grown-ups back in charge and start to have a technologically agnostic, all of the above approach. No one's saying we don't want less emissions, but let's do it without killing our economy. Let's do it without basically sending Australians to live back in a dark age. New South Wales, just last week, they were saying, can you not put your dishwasher on after 6 o'clock at night? I mean, this is going real well.
In the second week or the third week of December, we're getting told that. The third week of summer, not in the midst of summer, third week of summer.
It is just lunacy, and these people are just so blindly wedded to it. I think until literally the lights go out, they won't be happy.
I'm convinced. No, Hollie, I am convinced that unless we start losing living standards rapidly and we sit in the dark and half of us lose all our jobs because there'll be none to work, especially in things that need electricity, which is about 3/4 of our industry, until that happens, these dickheads won't wake up.
Well, it's already happening, Chris. We've already got people who cannot afford to put their air conditioning on, who are making choices about what they're doing with regards to their power bill. Our standard of living is already declining, and it seems to be this Labor government's dream to put it on a faster trajectory downwards for absolutely no benefit, except for Chris Bowen to go swan around a COP meeting over in Dubai. I mean, anyway, it's just before Christmas. Thank God there's some festivity, but this guy just sends my blood pressure through the roof because seriously, his ability to form a coherent policy, to put through an idea and even have some concept of consequences seems beyond the realm of his comprehension.
Yeah, and the danger we have with him being climate change minister is the fact that he is an evangelist. So therefore he doesn't sit there as a good minister would and weigh up different sides of the debate to try and work out whether offshore wind farms are a good fit in that particular region. Oh, no. It's full steam ahead, demonise gas, blow up coal-fired power stations, and we'll get the world moving again. It's just bullshit.
Yeah.
Anyway, another news poll result, and Labor's had a small bounce back. But Anthony Albanese, I tell you, he's clearly on the nose, and that's not a great place to be at the end of any year, but deservedly so, right?
Well, I mean, if you look at the challenges that every Australian is facing, and we are seeing it more and more, there was a survey out yesterday, I think through a news poll, that over 60% of Australians are cutting back on Christmas this year, on what they're spending on their own Christmas meals and celebrations, what they're spending on gifts. There are a lot of families very, very stressed as we come into this Christmas season, and there is no end in sight. This government is offering absolutely no hope when it comes to cost of living relief. And as we were just talking about, you've got that Mumpty Chris Bowen out there who's basically saying, don't worry, we're going to make sure you pay more for everything because, as your energy bill goes up and every industry's energy bill goes up, that means everything goes up. Every price goes up. And they just are so beyond, linking these issues together. Australians' cost of living pressures are just going to continue to grow, which is incredibly unfortunate and really sad for a lot of families. And I think, we are going to see it reflected in the polls. I think the saddest things for Australians as they head into this Christmas is it could be 16, 17 months till they get a chance to boot this lot out. And what damage could they do in that time?
Yeah. Yeah, they're starting to drop the ball on the big ticket numbers.
No, everywhere. Everywhere.
Immigration, national security, cost of living.
Everywhere.
Yeah.
Every ball. They've got no clue. And the backbench was looking increasingly despairing over the past few weeks as they look down on the Labor ministers and think, seriously, is this the best we've got? They have no clue what they're doing. I've never seen a government in such a shambles as what we've seen over the last, really since they lost the referendum, really since the voice. They have been completely rudderless.
Because right up until then, they were able to distract the public. They were able to focus on international issues, get him travelling around looking like a prime minister, focus on things like The Voice, which was about number 85 on the priority list. And so therefore they didn't have to do the heavy lifting. Now they've had to do the heavy lifting. They've worked out that it's a lot easier in the cheap seats.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. They don't know what heavy lifting is.
Yeah, I enjoyed seeing Albo's year in review, except
did
I miss the part, Hollie, about the miserable thumping the Prime Minister copped in the Voice referendum? Did I turn around at the time he said something about that?
Seriously, could you get over it? $450 million spent on a failed referendum. These guys have barely been able to say the word Indigenous since they lost it. And I mean, it just shows how wedded they were to the plight of Indigenous Australians in the fact that, well, that's just gone out the window now. I mean, those of us that have seen these guys in operation felt that they were really using this as a test case to see how easy it would be for them to change our constitution, to shift our country fundamentally through this term. And they got an almighty shock when over 60% of Australians, every single state in Australia, gave them a thumping and resounding no. Yeah. The fact that he could do that statement. I mean, the other thing that got me, he actually mentioned real wages going up, which is actually a complete lie. Real wages are going down. Real wages have been consistently going down. Whilst wages may have been increasing, it is not in line with inflation. It is under inflation. Real wages are going down. There is an Australian out there who is saying, my hip pocket is heavier since this government's come in. So it was actually not even truthful. And I mean, if they cannot even in their own end of year holiday message speak the truth and acknowledge what was probably the most divisive thing we've seen in this country for generations, yet not even acknowledge even the loss and say, as a country, we need to heal, would have been better than him pretending it just didn't exist. They are tone deaf. They think the Australian electorate are mugs and will forget. And it's important that we keep reminding you in the media, me in politics, that the Australians don't, and I don't think they will forget, but that Australians don't sort of get the next shiny thing over in the corner that Labor tries to distract them with, rather than remember the damage they have done to this country and our community.
See, if they were worth $2 bob, they would have had a plan B for when they lost the referendum. That is...
And they would have had a plan B for when they lost the High Court case. They would have had plan Bs when they had convicted terrorists being released. They would have had plan Bs when it was in the inflation rate and a mortgage rate, cash rate increase every single month. These guys have not had a plan B anywhere. And in fact, they've barely had a plan A. Their whole plan has been, this government caper's not hard. We've got public servants. We'll just do what they say and let it all roll through. Oh, I've got a brainwave. Let's try this one and throw it out there. There is no plan. I think if you could see a plan, you could start to say, well, you know, they wanted to achieve that. This has occurred, blah, blah, blah. We can find a path. They don't have a plan.
No, none. Daniel has said on the chat box, Bowen is a sellout. Warwick has said we are mushrooms kept in the dark and fed crap. I think you're spot on. Yes, Warwick, you're right. Controlling the population by the information given. That's exactly what the federal government of Australia thinks that they can do, and that we're all dummies. Hollie Hughes is the Senator for the Liberal Party in New South Wales. Hollie, you've certainly stood up and made a strong commitment to Israel over the weekend. Speaking at a pro-Israel rally, you were very critical of those who didn't even address the terror attacks on October 7. But you had a lot more to say. Have a listen to this.
There are more than Jewish people living in Israel, and they are being subjected to the same sorts of events and torture that is occurring, endorsed by so many supporters of Hamas. And I want to say to you, as a member of the coalition, I am embarrassed by what this federal government has done. Their support for a UN resolution. Yes. When you are voting with Iran, with North Korea, with Russia, you are wrong. When you are not standing up for the rights of Israel, our long-term friend and partner, you are wrong.
Hollie, I think in summary, if you are trying to stand up for the innocent people in Gaza who've been killed, you can't just do that on its own and not show respect and understanding and support for those who were killed by those terror attacks on October 7. It just makes sense, doesn't it?
Well, absolutely. And the treatment of not only Jewish women, but Israeli women who were raped, beaten, tortured and abducted and murdered, beheaded, and the most awful things happen and witnessed in often cases by their families. There was 57 days of silence from the UN women's groups, 57 days before they acknowledged what had happened to those Israeli women. And the thing is, they're not all Jewish women. You know, they're not all Jewish. You know, there were Muslims, there were Thai women, there were all sorts of nationalities that were impacted by this, yet complete silence from the UN and its women group that's supposed to be responsible for all women. The Red Cross, absolute shameful behaviour. They have not been in to see the hostages, the Jewish and Israeli hostages. That would be normal par for the course for the Red Cross to go in and check on hostage welfare, and that is what they do. That is part of the international rule of way things happen. Yet when it happens to Israelis and Jewish people, these organisations go missing, and it is absolutely disgusting. In Australia, we have anti-Semitism. We've had F the Jews, gas the Jews, which is now being reconfirmed through statement witnesses that have been provided to the police of people that heard that, despite some of our left-wing media doing their best to deny that it was ever said.
Yeah.
I mean, this is disgraceful anti-Semitism happening on our own shores. And, it does need to be called out. I am very proudly pro-Israel. I am a Zionist. I absolutely believe in the right of Israel to exist. And for those that argue that Jews somehow are not Indigenous to this part of the world, in just a couple of, week, we're going to be celebrating the birth of a pretty famous Jew in Bethlehem. For that reason alone, it proves the point that Jews have been in this area for a lot longer than 1948. So I think what is happening is abhorrent. I think this federal government, is speaking out of both sides of its mouth. It's trying to appease to its left-leaning pro-Palestinian wing within the Labor Party, as well as the extreme left in seats like the Prime Minister's own seat of Grangler. But yet trying to say to mainstream Australians, no, but of course we still stand with Israel.
That all said, and I'm a Christian, and I'm looking forward to celebrating the birth of Christ in 5 days' time. Yep. I am disgusted at what Benjamin Netanyahu has done in terms of the approach that he took in the early part of this war, where we've got up to 20,000 innocent people have died. That to me, and I've spoken to Israeli people on this radio program who are just as disappointed and sad about it.
I think there were 2 weeks before the Israelis went in. There was plenty of warning to Hamas and to the Palestinian people of Gaza that this was going to occur, that there was going to be an annihilation of Hamas. There was no mincing of language. There was plenty of time given for evacuations. Evacuation corridors were set up. But what we do know is Hamas uses Palestinian people as human shields. It was Hamas that blocked many Palestinians from leaving, which is why the deaths occurred. Now, Israel has a right to defend itself, and I staunchly believe that. They were given a number of weeks' warning, and I do think Israel was right to go in and attack. We know that we have tunnels that have been built by Hamas through all the aid money they've been given. They could have a city like Singapore had they spent the money on developing themselves, but instead they put it towards trying to destroy Israel. I've also spoken in the Senate a lot, Chris, about the UNRWA, who are the educators of Palestinian children. It is a fallacy to say that somehow those Palestinians are peace-loving people who support the right of Israel to exist. If you read the textbooks that Palestinian children are taught from by UN agencies, they are taught jihad. They are taught from the river to the sea. They are taught that they must be martyrs. They are taught about Temple Mount and what they need to do with regards to the mosque. It is much more complex than saying what Bibi did or what Netanyahu did was too over the top to dismiss Hamas. There was a peace accord. There was. Hamas broke that.
Yeah,
not
absolutely.
Israel.
There's no doubt
about it. Hamas used them as human shields. Hamas put their hospitals, their tunnels coming in and out of hospitals and schools. These are the people that need to be annihilated. And I'm sorry, Gazans should be able to have got out of Gaza should they want to. But I think to look at the way that they've been educated and the entire funding from Iran, et cetera, and those Middle Eastern countries around them, whose sole purpose has been the destruction of Israel, is somehow trying to paint a picture that all Palestinians that may have been caught up in this are peace-loving who wanted to support a two-state solution.
But they didn't want to die.
Well, how do we know? How do we know? Because they are taught from primary school that martyrdom and jihad is their duty. So how do we know that? And that's in the UN-based textbooks.
Okay.
So I think it's a bit simplistic to just all of a sudden paint a very rosy picture of a Palestinian peace-loving people, because I don't think that's the situation we were looking at.
Okay, let's talk about the year that has just gone. I just wanted to get from you, in a political sense, who you think was the outstanding individual in politics in 2023 and someone who's disappointed you the most.
Well, look, I think Jacinta Price has certainly had a year like no other, and the work that she did with Warren Mundine and Karen Liddell.
Oh, hang on, is it possible that she could be Australian of the Year, or is that too
so
close?
Ridiculous? She's a conservative woman, Chris. Don't be crazy. She's a conservative woman. That would be over. But, you just have to, her year has been outstanding, and on the back of her work with Karen and with Warren, we ensured that this divisive and what would have been a fundamentally shifting change in the Australian way of life was not able to proceed. So I think she's certainly
strong, courageous, brave, all of that.
Had a pretty good year. I don't think you'd look back on your year as her and go, well, I could have done more.
Failure?
Albanese, for sure, closely followed by Linda Burney, and then their whole cabal of those that put the referendum forward and failed in the yes vote. Alan Joyce probably hasn't had a cracker of a year either. But I think the biggest losers, unfortunately, are probably the Australian electorate, in that we are all facing more challenges thanks to the ineptitude of this government.
Yeah, very, very true. Hey, thank you very much for all your efforts on this radio program. We are growing and growing and growing, and when we're stronger and stronger, we hope to have you here as well. Thank you very much for your time, and have a great Christmas with your new husband and the family of 18 on Christmas Day.
Excellent. Happy Christmas, Sippy, and to all your listeners, hope you have a lovely, restful break.
We'll talk soon. Good on you, Hollie. Thank you.
See you.